We are ever so close to the 2021 F1 season, with testing happening this week, and the F1 calendar for the year is now set out, or at least a version of it is. But I thought I'd rank the 23 race circuits on the 2021 calendar and have a look at exactly which circuits I can't wait to see make their return following the predominantly European 2020 season. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. So each circuit will go into one of 5 tiers. These are snoozefest, not every season please, bang average, top quality and best of the best. And I'll rank each of the circuits based on the quality of races that we've seen in the past. Now, one point to note is that I can almost guarantee that there'll be changes to this calendar given the current global circumstances, but these races are accurate at the time of recording. And as always, if you enjoy this video then please make sure to hit that subscribe button. First up is the location that the F1 Circus travels to for the season opener this year, in Bahrain, a track that first hosted a race all the way back in 2004. And for me, the Bahrain International Circuit is a top quality track that's produced some incredible races over the years. It doesn't quite make it into my top tier just because this season the Formula 1 testing's happening at the track. As we've seen on countless occasions, the more testing a team has at a circuit, the closer they are to be able to get the best setup for the cars, which tends to mean the racing is a little bit worse. Take a look at Spain, for example, the host of testing for a number of years now. The testing certainly doesn't help matters there. For me, Bahrain has offered great racing in the past, so that's why it sits in the top quality section. Round 2 of the 2021 season is in Italy, at Imola, and it's returning to the calendar once again after last year's race. Personally, I don't think the race at Imola was too bad last year. However, I do appreciate that the track doesn't exactly lend itself to having great overtaking opportunities, particularly with the size of the 2021 cars. So for me, it's in the not every season please category. Next up is a race that was officially confirmed last week to fill the round 3 gap with a return to Portimao. And it's backed by popular demand after a great debut race for the track last season. So for me, that puts Portimao in the top quality category, as the coastal nature of the track lends itself to have changeable conditions. Plus the track itself has some great overtaking opportunities, as we saw last year. It was a fun race and I'm looking forward to getting back for the track's second F1 race this year. Round 4 now, and the F1 Circus travels to Spain, which is the first entry in the snoozefest category. As I mentioned earlier, the teams have so much data of this circuit as they've tested there so much in the past. The race in 2020 was truly dreadful, and I expect that this year's won't be too much better. The one potential saving grace is the work that the circuit has done at turn 10 to change it from a hard braking zone into a swooping left-hander up the hill. Now it must be said that these changes have probably been done with motorbikes in mind rather than Formula 1, but it wasn't exactly a great overtaking opportunity in Formula 1 anyway. So for me, it remains in the lowest tier. The 5th race of the 2021 season sees a return to Monaco, which is a controversial track anyway, given there are next to no overtaking opportunities. Even in 2018, Daniel Ricciardo found a way to win without an MG UK for the majority of the laps, which would be an impossibility on any other track. But for me, it sits in the bang average category. And the reason it doesn't sit lower on this list is because of the whole event. The drivers are constantly on the edge between glory and humiliation, and the swimming pool chicane is a perfect example of this. The inexperienced drivers so often get caught out as they take it a step too far. On a Saturday, the qualifying event is fantastic, and it's so incredible to see the best drivers in the world take on such a tricky street circuit. So it has its merits, but also that significant drawback of not having any overtaking. So it's a mid-table track for me. Baku up next, and for me, this track has found its way to becoming a top quality circuit. During its short appearance on the F1 calendar so far, there's been a huge amount of action and memorable moments. Take Lance Stroll's first ever podium, the time when the Red Bull drivers took each other out, and then of course Racing Point's battle between Sergio Perez and Esteban Ocon. That's not to mention in 2017, where Vettel purposefully hit Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes car under a safety car. The track tests the drivers well, particularly through the castle section, as Charles Leclerc learned during the 2019 qualifying session. Plus, it has that huge straight, which offers a great opportunity to overtake into turn 1. So for me, it's a top quality circuit. Formula 1 then travels to Canada for round 7, and for me this is the first entry to the best of the best category. The Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve has produced some great races over the last few years, and I think it was really missed on the shortened calendar last season. The circuit of course hosted the classic 2011 race where Jenson Button overtook Sebastian Vettel on the final lap after running in last place on lap 37 of the 70 lap race. It's a top tier track for me. Then for round 8, it's the French Grand Prix, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Paul Ricard is perhaps the worst circuit on the calendar, so it should come as no surprise that it sits in the bottom category in the snoozefest tier. The worst part is that the circuit has 167 possible configurations, so surely there must be a better layout that could be used that would improve the racing. Much like Spain, it's had some extensive resurfacing and reprofiling in the last year or so, which covers roughly 70% of the track. So that might make a slight difference, but let's face it, I'm not expecting much from this one. Next up, the 9th race of the season is at Austria, the track that hosted the 2 opening races of the season last year. And the Red Bull Ring is a great track. Since its return to the F1 calendar in 2014, it's become a top tier racetrack for me, so it goes into the best of the best category. The track has some great overtaking opportunities going into turns 1, 3 and 4, with some great races over the last few years. Plus it's becoming a theme with tracks that sit higher up on this list. The location lends itself to having changeable conditions, which always lends itself to good Formula 1 racing. Silverstone next for round 10, and for me this track goes into the top quality category, for a number of reasons. For starters, the history of the racing at Silverstone in Formula 1 stems back to the 1940s, and the circuit hosted the first World Championship race in Formula 1 in 1950. The circuit's had a number of iterations and has evolved over time to become one of the most testing tracks on the calendar, and we saw that last year as the team struggled to manage the tyres on the demanding fast-paced circuit. Now I have to admit there's probably some biases in here as well, as I'm British, but this is my tier list and I think is a great track that lends itself to overtaking. So it's a top quality track for me. Hungary next, and I've put this one in the not every season please category. The Hungarian is nicknamed Monaco without the walls, as the track is narrow and has the characteristics of a street circuit. There is of course the long start-finish straight that lends itself to some DRS overtakes, and the run down to turn 2, which has given some pretty good overtaking moves in the past. But for me, it isn't a race that I get particularly excited for, which is why it sits towards the bottom of this list. Next up is Spa for round 12 of the 2021 F1 season, and this track is quite clearly one of the best of the best. It's a real staple on the F1 calendar and has a mix of long straights and fast challenging corners. Once again, as I've already mentioned on a few occasions now, the changeable weather conditions add to this track's appeal for me, but the added bonus at Spa is that the circuit spans over such a large area that at times the weather conditions can be significantly different in one sector compared to another. And that's why it makes the top tier for me. Zandvoort follows up next, and I have to say I'm worried about this track. It's incredibly narrow in places and might not lend itself to particularly great Formula 1 racing. However, we've not seen a race with modern Formula 1 cars at this circuit yet, so for me it'll sit in the bang average category until then. One thing to note on this circuit though is that I'm massively looking forward to seeing the Dutch fans coming out to support Verstappen, as they have done at other European events in the last few years. So I really hope that they're able to host fans at this race in September. The second Italian Grand Prix of the 2021 season follows next, and for me it makes it into the top quality category. Monza is another circuit that's got a lot of history and has also offered some great races in the past, including of course the race in 2020, which offered the unexpected winner in Pierre Gasly. It doesn't sit in the top tier for me, and I think that's partly due to the fact that the qualifying sessions have been a bit farcical in recent years, as the teams are forced to leave it up to the last minute in a bid to get a crucial slipstream to have any chance of setting a faster lap time. The F1 teams will then head to Sochi for the Russian Grand Prix, and for me this track fits in the snoozefest category. The track couldn't have been made much differently given the geography of the location, but either way, it isn't a great one for Formula 1 racing. The 16th race of the season will be in Singapore, and the F1 event at Singapore is certainly one of the spectacles of the season. However, given the track layout and tight corners, I think it sits in the not every season please category. It's hosted a few good races in the past, but I think that having the Singapore Grand Prix every few years would be the best choice for me. I certainly didn't miss it in 2020. Suzuka up next, and this track is straight to the top tier for me, as this track is one of the best on the calendar. There's a great mix of high-speed corners like 130R, plus the S-turns through Sector 1, and this place has really got it all. It's produced some great races in the past, and I'm starting to feel like a broken record here, but it does offer that all-important changeable conditions on occasions as well. The F1 teams then head to the Circuit of the Americas, and for me this is one of Hermann Tilke's best circuit designs. Since Formula 1 races at COTA in 2012, the racing's been great there. The run up to turn 1 offers a pinch point which is always dramatic on lap 1, plus turns 3 to 6 are modelled off of Maggots and Beckett's from Silverstone, which are some of the best sections of racetrack out there. For me, this circuit goes into the top quality tier, as it hasn't yet got the history to pull it to the best of the best tier. Next up is Mexico, and for me I really can't wait to see this event in 2021. To have Sergio Perez in a front-running car at his home Grand Prix is going to be great to see. Plus, in recent races, Red Bull have been the quickest team. The track's the highest on the calendar, sitting at over 2 kilometres above sea level, and the altitude means that the teams have to run additional downforce due to the thinner air. It also means that the engines aren't at their optimum, which bridges the gap well from the Red Bull team to the Mercedes cars. The track itself has a good mix of long straights and heavy braking zones that offer plenty of overtaking opportunities. That's of course not to mention the stadium section, and I can imagine the atmosphere there makes it one of the best places to watch a Formula 1 race. For me, it's a top quality track. F1 then heads further south to Sao Paulo for the Brazilian Grand Prix, and this racetrack is one of the best. Not only has it hosted some of the best races of all time, but it's also crowned so many champions there in the past. There have been so many notable incidents at this track recently. For example, Ferraris taking each other out in 2019, and then of course in 2018 when Verstappen was comfortably leading the race before making contact with Esteban Ocon as the Frenchman tried to unlap himself. That's not to mention the 2008 World Championship victory for Lewis Hamilton in changeable conditions. This track is simply one of the best for me. We then have Australia for round 21 of the season, which is an odd sight for everyone who's watched Formula 1 over the last decade or so, as the race at Albert Park in Melbourne has been the season opener for many years. This year the event's been postponed to November, to hopefully have fans be able to attend the race. I wonder whether it'll have the same appeal when not being the opener, as really the racing at Albert Park hasn't exactly been the best in recent years. So for me, it sits in the bang average category. There is of course work going on at the moment to potentially increase those overtaking opportunities, but whether these changes do the job remains to be seen. For the penultimate race of the season, we then have the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, as F1 returns to the Middle East for the last couple of races of the season. The race is due to be held in Jeddah and will be a street circuit until a purpose-built track can be made in the future. The organisers have said it will have a good flow of long straights and tight corners, and with no equivalent track on the calendar. But let's face it, which race organiser wouldn't say that their race was unique? I'm not going to add this one to the list as we simply don't even know what the track looks like at this point, but I'm looking forward to seeing how the track looks. Abu Dhabi then hosts the final round of the 2021 season, and this is definitely going in the snoozefest category. It's a dreadful track for F1 racing, and yet by just removing the chicane at turns 5 and 6, replacing it with the straight piece of track that already exists, could improve it to no end. The 2020 race was well and truly a snoozefest, but who knows, we might get lucky in 2021 and it may be a title decider. So that's my tier list for the 2021 calendar as it stands at the time of recording. I'm sure it will change given the current circumstances in the world though. One thing I would say about the list in hindsight is that it's quite top heavy, which I suppose can only be a good thing, right? Which tracks would you move and why? Let me know in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this video and watched this far, then hit that like button and subscribe for more F1 related content in the future.